I am so excited to speak to this person who is someone who I think has done the heavy lifting associated with asking questions about the last election. You know, we had Greg Palast on, and he continues to be a good friend of the show. Greg Palast talks about voter suppression. I think he shows the math and has shown the math in regard to the last presidential election about voter suppression and essentially the ways in which so many votes were shed from the voter rolls. But when it comes to the last election, there was more than just voter suppression, quite potentially, and I think quite probably. So in this election that Trump carried all the swing states in, you I think can reasonably ask some questions with the involvement of Elon Musk and the aggressive way in which these guys have taken power, and they've taken power away from investigative agencies. You can ask questions about how the election was processed and how the count was processed. And so those questions are being answered and asked by our next guest, Jessica Denson, everyone. Yeah.
So happy to be back with you, Mark.
You really have done it. I mean, you went to Washington in the bitter cold, and you know, I feel like you've been a cry in the night. I don't know how many people are hearing your cry. I first would ask you to reiterate sort of the overall position that you've taken on the election, then speak to whether or not you feel there's any momentum around the conversation right now.
Well, first, can I make an announcement, and then we'll get to that?
Sure.
The last time you had me on, we were talking about 14th Now, and we are doing 14th Now 2.0 in DC on March 14th. So we are continuing this movement. This is a constitutionally based movement. I and many of our organizers do not believe that the results of this election were legitimate for reasons I'm more than happy to discuss with you.
So, explain why it's called 14th Now, if you would.
Well, sure. It's called 14th Now. I mean, that was kind of the birth of our movement. I reported extensively on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment on lights on leading up to Donald Trump's illegal swearing in violation of Section 3. Section 3 is, of course, the article of the 14th Amendment that says insurrectionists cannot hold office. And the Trump v. Anderson ruling never took away that disqualification. He is currently, right now, at this moment, an illegitimate president. So our whole movement was predicated on Section 3. We tried to pressure Congress to reject his electors, and God knows, Mark, they knew we were there. They knew we were there. We had not a massive showing of people, but we had people on the phones. We were in the halls of Congress. We had a 3-day event on the Lincoln Memorial. They knew we were there. Every single one of those lawmakers across the aisle violated their oath on January 6th by certifying his election in violation of the Constitution. So you and so many of us knew what we were in for. We knew this horror show that we were in for, that we're living right now. We have a constitution to protect us from it. We are supposed to be using that constitution. And so there's been such a beautiful burgeoning protest movement with 5051, with other groups that are just, popping up everywhere, protesting Elon Musk, protesting Tesla, protesting at their state capitals, protesting all over the country. And so we thought, do we need to do this again? Was 14th Now just a warm up? And we really do feel like we have to do this again. And I would say what distinguishes 14th Now is that we need immediate action. We don't think we can live through 4 years of this. We should be normalizing the conversation about Donald Trump's impeachment and removal yesterday. Any constitutional lever, and there are others. Impeachment and removal is not the only one. So we are having a second massive event with the affiliation of 5051 and other groups on March 14th in Washington, D.C. And we would love the masses to come and join us. We're this time doing our best to mobilize buses and other transportation to get people there from other parts of the country if they can't get there on their own. But this is a day that we really think we need to get to D.C., take our stand, claim the power that the Constitution bestows on us, we the people, and demand that action be taken now. So it's at nowmarch.org. Thank you so much. You've got it up on the screen there, nowmarch.org, and we are doing this again on March 14th in Washington, D.C.
So now to the question that I was just noting, which is that, the conversation around this issue has continued. And, you were early to the party, which I really love. And I think we were sort of on the early side of the party also,
Yeah.
with questions about the election. I wanted to, though, get to whether or not you feel, it sounds as though, implied anyway, you feel as though there is more of a conversation around this than there was before.
I think there definitely is. Now, one of the groups that we platformed on Lights On is called Election Truth Alliance. And they are just a grassroots group of data analysts. These are not partisan people. These are people that looked at the data coming in from places like Clark County and saw that something was way off. I mean, if you're familiar with their work, you know they've done analyses of the distribution of the data coming in from the tabulators on early voting days. And when you show it on a graph, what appears is what looks like what's been dubbed a Russian tail. And the reason it's been dubbed a Russian tail is because in the 2020 constitutional referendum in Russia, there is the same kind of phenomenon occurs, where you see it kind of progressing like a normal bell curve, and then it just goes off in this non-organic pattern. And that is an indication, they believe, of manipulation. They've seen this in more than one place.
They've seen it in a lot of these swing districts and swing states.
Yes.
And I did look at that graph as well. And what you saw, what Jessica's describing is, and it's tough. And it's funny. I was going to post the graph, and I should have sent it to you, Tony. But essentially, you've got it's not important. There wasn't much to the graph except to say that you could visually see the way in which, when you say the returns were coming in as expected, meaning, you know, with and then all of a sudden there is a surge where it's just Trump. It's like, it's just so extraordinary. It so defies any kind of history that one would think, well, just how does that happen in swing state after swing state? It's an extraordinary thing.
Yeah, and Mark, I mean, it's almost like those who are not having this conversation are just denying things that have been said out of the horse's mouth about this election. Donald Trump said leading up to this election, "I don't need your votes." He said that repeatedly. "I don't need your votes." He said the night before his illegal inauguration, Elon Musk knows those vote counting computers better than anyone. There are interviews with Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson with that little kid, that poor little kid who is, God almighty, what is going to become of that child, sitting on his lap saying, you know, basically confessing that they have the election fixed and know how to hack things. I mean, they're saying this in broad daylight. And then on top of that, we have this data, the indication from the data. We have bomb threats, hundreds of bomb threats on election day in Democratic precincts. We have so many indications. I finally had Greg Palast on my show last week, and I really believe that it wasn't just a one they didn't just come at this election with one attack. It was a multi-pronged attack, and the voter suppression, of course, is undeniable, and that's millions of votes that could have put Kamala Harris over the edge. But you also, I think, have to, this is the thing people are talking about midterms. I think, Mark, I mean, we're kind of fooling ourselves if we think we're going to have a legitimate midterm. Donald Trump has also just recently made comments about being able to fix this midterm and having some secret plan. I mean, to think that we can get to a midterm and have a legitimate election that's not manipulated without reckoning with what happened in 2024 is, I think,
well, I agree with you completely. I mean, I don't. That's why we're here. We're going to get him in the midterms. We're going to get him in the general, the next general. Yeah. I don't. I think, first of all, there's so many ways in which Trump could prevent the next general election from happening. Yes. And I get it. There are probably people walking in, please, Mark, are you kidding? We always heard about this, et cetera. But I think there is an aggressive move to put in so many loyalists that you don't really have any guardrails in place. Now, the one thing I will say about elections in this country is that they are run by states. So the arm of the federal government is not supposed to be in those elections state by state. Right. That said, there are ways that they can, for example, say that the threat to the poll workers or the threat to the elections of purity and legitimacy is so intense that we need to put federal troops around these various, or we need they've just deputized a bunch of people to be sort of Muskian and
Elon Musk security now can carry weapons on federal property.
Thank you. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And so I said it when he pardoned the Proud Boys and pardoned all of those J6ers. I said, this is his militia. And you can say, well, please. I mean, what is it? What are they going to? Well, they can do things like say, we're going to deputize you, just as we have these Muskian security guys, and you now can carry those weapons and you can be assigned to these various polling places. I mean, it seems extraordinary, but it's really not even a day's drive from where we are. CC Ryder says this, though. I want you to be able to take on some of these. CC Ryder says, everyone needs to watch Biden's cyber director, Jen Easterly, interview with the Washington Post on election security landscape in the 2024 contest on YouTube. She also posted a report on the CISA website. No cyber fraud is what she's saying. That's Biden's cyber director, Jen Easterly. Can you speak to that?
I would wish I could. I'll have to look up that video. That said, I will say that what I have seen, and even what I have seen from other left-leaning or so-called pro-democracy, spaces on YouTube and the podcast space, is they will have a conversation that just that takes some conspiracy theory out there. For instance, very early on, they would say, there was the 15 million vote thing. Okay, we got past that. We know it wasn't a 15 million vote margin. They will take something, almost have like a straw man counter to a lot of the evidence we've seen. So I don't know about that specific report or discussion. I'll have to look into it. One thing I can say is that one of the people we've had on Lights On is Susan Greenhalgh from Free Speech for People. Now, she is an election security expert. She works with Alex Halderman. She has worked with him in the past, one of the preeminent hackers, cybersecurity people in this country, who is cited in Kamala Harris's book, by the way. And she writes in her book, The Truths We Hold, about how easy it is to hack elections. This is in Kamala Harris's own words. So Susan Greenhalgh worked with Alex Halderman, cited by Kamala Harris, talked to us on Lights On about the CISA statements, how the CISA statements, the security administration that's overseeing supposedly election security, are not comprehensive. It is her life's work to see where the holes are and where the checks are not being made. And so I think there is a really unfortunate effort by those in the so-called democratic or pro-democracy space to say, oh no, everything's good here, as a result of Donald Trump's caricature of election integrity in 2020. And if you look at it in that way and you see what they did in 2020, they made such a spectacle of election integrity and voter integrity, which actually is a real issue at the end of the day, securing elections, that we could never discuss this legitimately again. And that's a really dangerous place to be. Every healthy democracy conducts rigorous audits, checks, things to make sure there was no manipulation. Romania, Georgia, these countries seem to understand that you have to take action when Russia interferes in your election. But here, my God, in the United States, we've just got a Russian asset sitting in the White House, and we couldn't even double check to make sure the guy didn't cheat to get himself in there.
There is a fat and happy way in which Americans proceed. We kind of take our democracy for granted. I think that will be a thing of the past, given the next couple of years. But it really has led us to this place where we got to go, well, it's legitimate. I mean, it's amazing. Trump tapped into this and that and American grievance, and there may be considerable truth to that. I mean, it certainly was a tight race, and you can, again, Kamala Harris, I think, was a flawed candidate, but under the circumstances, I mean, there was a rising despot who was clearly about to take office. But that said, I mean, he did tap into whatever. But I think there is this sense that, and I think you so beautifully put it, the idea that you become an election denier was something that became so associated with MAGA. The complete bankruptcy of that insistence. You had Giuliani out there, the My Pillow guy. You just had a cartoonish kind of protest about the 2020 election that Democrats so didn't want to be associated with that kind of pushback that they completely let this stuff go, and they let all questions regarding the election sort of pass. I don't understand why there wouldn't at least be a call for recounts in some of these swing states. again, I will never understand that. It's not expensive. They could have raised that money in an instant. What they paid for Beyonce to show up at one of her rallies, they could have easily put that money into a recount. I think that at least would have settled some of these issues.
Yeah, something like 60% of the base wanted it. I mean, it's what their base wanted. It's what we wanted. And it's tragic. It is absolutely tragic that it didn't happen when the time remained for them to do that.
Karen says media is being taken over by the right, either in fact or intimidation. It is true. You don't get a lot of media oxygen on these questions. Now, I'm sure there's some there who would say, hey, it's because there's no legitimacy to these questions, but it is, there's enough of a cry about this, there's enough of a drumbeat that you'd think the media would pick up on this.
Yes, Mark, and it is not, sadly, only right-wing media that doesn't pick up on it. And it's not even only MSNBC and CNN that doesn't pick on it. It is those in our space. As those in our space. I literally left my network, my former network, Midas Touch, that bragged last week about ousting Joe Rogan from the, top of the podcast charts. I left their network to be able to have this conversation because they wanted to shut it down 3 days after the election and not touch it with a 10-foot pole. So that is the space that we're living in.
So to that point, do you think, and leaving them out, or including them, it doesn't matter to me, but I just would ask, do you feel as though that's because they worry about the feds coming and shutting them down, or Fed intimidation, or the ways in which they've weaponized the IRS? There are many ways that Washington and the Trump administration, or any administration in power, but certainly this one seems bent on revenge, can weaponize many of the instruments associated with that power to essentially intimidate you from not covering or having these conversations.
I don't know. I mean, if you watch any of their programming, they would tell you that they're willing to, go to the gulag for being critics of Donald Trump. So, I mean, that doesn't match up with what they're telling their audience. I think it's uncomfortable. I think it's an uncomfortable conversation. What I did on Lights On is I confronted the gaslighting out of the gate. I'm like, listen, I know that they are going to put that in that framing, and we have to reject that. We have to reject it immediately and correct it and understand how dangerous that projection and gaslighting is. And this is coming from a projectionist and gaslighter. So let's just handle that right out of the gate and then do our due diligence. I don't know. I mean, when it came, Midas Touch, their failure to cover the election anomalies just rolled into a kind of counter narrative on Section 3. And what I kind of saw it as is them wanting to cover their friends in the Democratic establishment. And listen, I am all for uplifting those who are doing our work and are on our side every single day. But if they have an opportunity to do things that they're not doing, they damn well need to be called out. And we are doing a disservice to ourselves, to our party. I'm an independent, but to the party we support, to our audience, to the country, if we are just mindlessly cheering them on when they are not using the levers at their disposal to save us. That is what has gotten us this far. It is what's going to end this republic as we know it if we don't start holding especially our friends accountable.
It's interesting because the Republicans, again, now they've had their party, I suggest, completely reconstituted with this MAGA infestation. But the Republicans throw everything at the wall to see what sticks.
I know.
It's remarkable. Democrats are, well, we had the election. That's what we threw at the wall, and it didn't work out. And sort of, really? I mean, I'll give the Republicans credit. They kick and scream during a legitimate election of Joe Biden. And so much do they kick and scream that it becomes a litmus test for the next administration when they retake power, that if you don't accept that Biden's victory was not legitimate, you can't be in this administration. That is the question that they're asking as a loyalty test to make sure that everybody around Trump is on board. The Democrats, it seems, just are far more tepid in the way they go about these arguments.
Yeah, well, this is how democracy dies, Mark. I mean, I don't know. That's why we have to be, that's why we're doing 314. That's why we're doing this. And I really hope that everybody, I've been doing everything I can on Lights On to normalize the conversation. Like they throw crimes at the wall to burn things down. Can't we throw the Constitution at the wall and every legal opportunity and mechanism we have at the wall? I mean, I had a guest on last week who was one of our speakers back in January. She's a columnist for Huffington Post and other outlets, and she proposed a way that we can still use Section 3 by declaring an internal coup that is going on right now with Elon Musk and Donald Trump and our federal government. This is an internal coup. This is not normal. This is not constitutional. This is completely lawless. Our Democratic representatives could be normalizing still the conversation about Donald Trump's disqualification and demanding an amnesty vote, because without that, without a 2/3 vote to clear him, he remains disqualified. So there are so many tools. Impeachment is one. Section 3 is another. There are tools right here at our disposal to use, and we have to demand that they use them. We absolutely have to demand that they use them. Throw every legal mechanism at the wall. Take a page out of their playbook, for God's sakes, but for the salvation of our country, for truth, for freedom, for once.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, and we got to wrap up in another minute or so, but if Trump's numbers were lower than Harris's popular vote, this would make sense of why Trump allows Musk to do what he's doing. I think he wants total control of government and power without regard to any of the regulatory and protective mechanisms that are associated with that power. So that's why he got rid of all those the inspector generals to start,
Yes.
and then the actual generals to finish. We just saw it. So these are all ways in which his power can be balanced, in effect. And of course, he's populated his entire administration with loyalists who all answer that question in the affirmative. That's to say, the election was stolen from you, Mr. President, and we're glad you're back in power. Musk is purging Democrats, says Go See Cali. And how is impeachment possible at this point? The numbers aren't there. Of course, that's true, but the impeachment conversation you can have. And I also feel as though, last thing, just to revisit sort of the central thesis, the idea somehow is that Colorado did adjudicate the fact that Trump, this is a question of whether he was going to appear on the ballot or not.
Right.
Trump was involved in the insurrection around J6, and you can pick it up from there. But what I was trying to make clear is that this isn't just pie in the sky.
No.
This is, if you look at the adjudicated result of a court case, you see that you do have something to hang this 14th Amendment protest on.
100%. And I encourage everybody to go to the legal authority page at nowmarch.org. That completely will debunk any misconception that Trump v. Anderson removed his disqualification. Didn't touch it. Didn't touch the fact that he's an adjudicated insurrectionist. That is what he is. He's disqualified from this office. It only attached to his ballot access, as you explained. And I just want to say to your viewers that have been talking about the popular vote or what Trump has, even if we take the numbers at face value and say there was no manipulation, no interference, even no voter suppression, take the numbers at face value, Donald Trump got somewhere around a third of eligible voting adults that supported him in this election. A third. No mandate, not anywhere near a half. That's the kind of support that he has. You look at the marches around the country. You look at who's going to join us on 314. That's the real energy. That's what this country really represents and wants. We are not on his side. The masses are with us.
That is certainly true. And the kind of upheaval that we're seeing, the tumult in Washington, is one that will be, I think, not washed down easily with all of that public that you're talking about that didn't vote for him, which, as you say, is a lot of people. So it'll be interesting to see, I think, and I don't mean to put it in kind of like, it'll be interesting to see from an intellectual perspective. I mean, I really think when this pushback starts, and it's already begun, and there's as you know, there's the no spend day at the end of the
February 28th. Yep.
February 28th.
Yes.
And there's a sort of like speak with your wallet. I like that. These are ways in which you can make noise against this machine. Now, it's a complete takeover. In my view, the coup is complete. But and I made that call early, as did others, I think. But my point is simply that when you replace all the generals or the Joint Chiefs, et cetera, you are with loyalists. You bring some guy in out of retirement. You wake him up, dust him off, and you say you're going to be running the Joint Chiefs. What? I mean, it's a sign. And so noise has to be made. I applaud you and your group for making it. These are questions that need to be asked. And I don't think that you can put these issues to bed too easily. I think, you can look in the comments section of even this conversation and see how some people want to put them to bed. And you say, hey, look, this has all been talked about. There's nothing to see here. And then there are others who say, look, it's clear. I mean, and you can see by Musk's disposition. You could even see by the way in which Elon Musk had the results of the election hours before it was called.
Yes.
These are things that also have been talked about openly. So again, that might be circumstantial, but nonetheless, it's not irrelevant. So I applaud you, Jessica. And again, your podcast, how often do you do it?
Well, I schedule it every Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern live, but I do shorts throughout the week. Like we had Greg Palast on last week. I have guests on frequently throughout the week that we put up on Lights On. But it's on YouTube, Jessica Denson channel on YouTube. That's where you find the Lights On podcast. And I'll put in a plug for nowmarch.org. Also, Free Speech for People has the Impeach Trump Again petition, if you want to go there. And Election Truth Alliance, don't take it from me. They're doing the analyses. They're doing the data, the work. So go to those three websites and check that out.
There's your website. And I do, there's your YouTube channel. I do love their work. The Stat Guys. In fact, I want to get one of them on the show. It's very funny. I was watching a bunch of their stuff and I'm very impressed. So Jessica Denson, Lights On is the podcast. You're a friend of the show. You're welcome back anytime, and we'll definitely be in touch. Good luck in March with the march. Okay. Jessica Denson, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.